Hello everyone, and welcome to the first day of Internship Training Week organized by Communiqué, IIT Kharagpur. Today, Atharv, Bhumika, and I will be hosting panel discussion.
We hope this session provides you with valuable guidance and practical takeaways regarding the finance domain. If you have any questions along the way, you can drop them in the Q&A section or the chat box and we will take them up at the end.
Let's begin by introducing our esteemed panelists. Our first panelist is Mr. Aditya Nahata, currently interning at IB Cap Ventures. Aditya, could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. So hey guys, I'm Aditya Nahata. I'm currently in my final year of mechanical engineering. I'm a boarder of RK Hall and I'm interning at Ivy Cap Ventures this summer.
Thank you, Aditya. We also have Mr. Vidya Jha with us, who is currently interning at Nomura. Vidya, could you please introduce yourself?
So, hi folks, this is Vidya Jha, final year of mechanical engineering. I'm interning as a global markets analyst intern in the index structuring team here in Nomura, Mumbai, and I'm from Rajendra Prasad House Associates.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, there might be some network issue. So, to kick things off, we would love to dive right into your journeys. Firstly, when and how did you decide that you wanted to target a finance profile for your career? Were there any other profiles you were considering initially? And what ultimately tilted the scales towards finance?
Cool. So, I guess I'll go first.
Aditya, would you like to
So, as
answer?
for me, am I lagging? I'm not sure.
Then you can go.
Okay, cool. I started. I'll just wrap it up first. So, yeah, personally for me, I was introduced to the non-tech profiles when I started my stints in the different societies on campus. Right. When I entered the campus, I was again pretty clueless about the stuff that we could do here, the domains that we could go into. But as time passed, I found myself in different societies. I found myself interacting with different people, like different backgrounds, seniors who had already chosen the profiles that they wanted to target, so on and so forth. Consequently, my inclination towards finance stems from there, right? And over time, as I explored the domain further, I realized that was something that did fit well with me. Consequently, I chose to go into the domain, right? As for the any other domains that I was targeting, so finally I was like I had prepared for consulting and the data profiles as well. Because as I'll further delve deeper into finance as we move ahead, you'll understand that there is this sort of overlap between preparing for finance and data. Consequently, you can prep for them together. So yeah, I've done the same.
Yeah, cool. So I think for me it stemmed from prop trading. I used to prop trade in my first year. So I've always been interested and curious
All
about
right.
markets and
Thank you for sharing
investments.
your journey. That was very helpful.
Uh, yeah, so am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. I think there's some network issue on Bhumika's side. So yeah, you can continue.
Uh,
Please continue.
yeah, cool. Yeah, so I've been involved with the markets and investments in general since my first year, and I again through campus experiences, societies, case comps, and such, I explored finance as a domain more. And speaking of other domains, I did start with data analytics in my first year, but I think by the time CDC approached, I was pretty clear that I wanted to go into finance. And like Vidya said, there's sort of a blurry line between data analytics and finance. They kind of go hand in hand. So yeah, that became my primary profile.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your journeys.
Okay, now moving on to the shortlisting phase. How much importance do you think grades and CGPA actually hold for companies hiring in finance roles?
Uh, right. So I guess I'll start us off. Uh, the thing is, there are some companies where there's a hard CGPA cutoff of like usually 8. So in that case, there's not much you can do. In the sense that they won't like your CV won't get opened if the CGPA is below 8. But for companies that don't have a strict cutoff criteria, I would say CGPA still matters a lot. And especially if you have like a sub 8 CGPA, I would say the rest of your profile needs to be able to compensate for that. So yeah, most companies do have a hard CGPA cutoff in finance. And if they don't, then you cannot afford to slack off in the rest of your CV.
Okay. Oh, and Vidhay, what is your opinion on this?
Just building on that, the thing about the hard cutoff is like definitely true. Like, there are firms who have uh, substantiated bias, if you will. Same goes for Nomura. They got I think they got hard cutoff of 8. There's one firm which has got a hard cutoff of close to 8.7 as well. So PGPA is definitely important for finance because at the end of the day, even if you do end up getting a shortlist, that can become a hindrance further down the stream as well. So, of course, but if you do have an exceptional profile, there are like firms who are willing to sort of look past that as well. So at this point, I'm assuming since the grades are out, you can't do much for your CGPA. But apart from that, definitely you can try to strengthen your profile as much as possible because there are firms that are willing to look beyond it. And when I say there's a hard cutoff, it's like even if you just exceeded by let's say zero point zero 0.02, it's fair game, right? It's all dependent on the interview. So yeah, as soon as you are able to brief it even by a tad bit, it's fair game, right? In the interview, all fair.
Oh, okay. I actually have a follow-up. What is generally considered a safe or respectable CGPA for shortlists?
So finance, 8 plus would be respectable. And but like if you want to be able to fit for all the firms, now I'm not including quant firms here, right? Markets and the other rules. So best would be exceeding 8.7 because that opens all the firms up for you. But if you're 8 plus, then like I guess apart from one firm, everything's fair game. So 8 is definitely respectable and to be very honest, safe as well.
Okay. Apart from that, once you are actually in the interview room, does CGPA still play a role if two candidates are otherwise equally qualified, or are there options for someone lagging slightly behind on grades?
I would say after the shortlisting process, it comes down more or less entirely to the interview itself. So if the interview experience, the CGPA is more or less a barrier in shortlisting. Past that, it's just how well versed you are with your CV, how well did your interview go. So that's much more of a differentiating factor further down the process.
Okay, that was very helpful.
Yeah, so building further on the idea of profile strengthening, could you elaborate on what kind of past projects or internships would be preferred by companies in the finance aspect? Like, how much weight does a deep driven corporate financial analysis done by a student carry during the selection process?
What was the last part of the question?
Say a student does a deep driven corporate finance analysis. Maybe they do a financial analysis on a specific company per se. So, like, how much would it help a student in getting the selection?
Cool. Sure. I guess I'll start. So understand that for most of us, our academics aren't really in line with what the finance firms do. Right? Most of us are not studying finance per se. Consequently, what they are looking for is interest in finance. How do you show that? It's mostly through your projects, right? So at least in the finance domain, internships and projects hold the most amount of weight possible, right? So you do need to focus on them and like general fund hires that try to do as many interns as possible to keep them as relevant as possible, all of that. But you can definitely, if you haven't done interns per se, if you didn't get the time to do them or something of the sort, you can definitely make up for them by doing good enough projects, right? Because this is a question that I do get often that let's say I haven't done an intern per se, I haven't done a corporate intern, I haven't done an intern in let's say some particular domain. Can I still get a shortlist? So understand that me myself, I had like one research intern, and apart from that, my CV was full of projects, right? So consequently, if your projects are relevant and strong enough, you're able to back them well enough in the interviews, it's fair game, right? So internships and projects are super important. Also, they go hand in hand, not necessarily hand in hand, but like they can stand as a substitute for each other. But all said and done, having interns is definitely a plus that, if possible, you should try to have them on your CV. Right. Aditya.
Yeah, so following up on that, again, coursework wise, there isn't much overlap between most of the finance roles and the department coursework. So obviously, internships and projects are important, like for this, right? A brand intern is also a very strong spike in if you have an intern at say an AMC or a well-recognized VC firm that can that's a strong indicator that you are interested in finance and also you possess the relevant skill sets. I think there are definitely other ways to show that through case competitions or through projects. But yeah, focus on the roles that you're targeting and sort of what projects will be relevant for that role. Because even within finance, the roles are very diversified. So you have to sort of be careful what kind of project are you like showing on your CV. Uh, Core finance projects, for example, like a DCF valuation, I think that's good to show interest. But again, most of the firms, you won't actually be using that on the job. So, yeah.
Okay, so following
Yeah,
up on the
following up on
initial
that,
question.
uh,
Oh, sorry. Please continue.
yeah, one sec. Yeah, sure. I'll just continue for time. Thank you. Yeah, so following up on that, understand that like uh, when he said that know what type of roles show up on campus, please do so. Because quite some people have like certain ideas of the sort of roles that come on campus, and that's not necessarily true, right? So that definitely look at the roles that come on campus and try to make your like try to tailor your resume according to the stuff that you might be doing on the job, right? Because that's something folks do appreciate. Like even here, I do get that understanding. If your projects are relevant to the work they're doing, that's a big plus. Make that happen. And of course, do you have any further questions for like how much ML or let's say tech is relevant to the role? Because I'll say it right now, or otherwise I'll plug it over there. So that's my question to you
You
folks.
can continue right now.
Cool. Then, so the thing is that most of the roles that are showing up on campus, right, could be Nomura GM, could be Morgan Stanley S&P. Understand that inherently these roles do have a tech sort of background to them. So if you're going absolutely non-tech with like zero ML data, AI, or any coding background on your CV, that will be, let's say, something that you'll have to like that won't be positive. That won't be a step up for you. So direct advice, like to a certain extent, like even for Nomura GM, when they were interviewing in Kanpur, they were asked to write pseudocodes during the interview. Even in Nomura, like on an on-campus PGP thingy, quite some folks were asked to write down pseudocodes. So consequently, a tad bit of understanding of how coding works, right, was at the end of the day, this is a finance role. For sure it is. The work is pretty finance inclined, but tech is, but like Python, data, a little bit of ML is how you implement things, how you make things happen. So consequently, if you do have a project of that inclination on your CV, that will definitely be a plus point. Cool. Yeah, your question.
Um, Adding to the previous question, I would like to ask that on the basis of roles inside the campus, what PORs are exactly the interviewers looking for? Like, what is the POR that actually matters? Or what kind of POR should a student look for?
So
Um,
insofar as Russia, Aditya, go ahead.
yeah, so when it comes to finance, I would say PUR maybe doesn't play as much of an importance as consulting. Uh, the usual reason a company looks for POR is like experience you have with managing teams, with leadership. Those things do play a role, but I would say for finance profiles, it's not maybe as relevant. It's maybe the second or the third thing a company would see. Projects would be much more relevant than that, or internships. And yeah, adding to what Vidya was saying, I think I see a lot of CVs with projects that are like say DCF, M&A, LBO. These things are good that they show like you have interest towards finance, but understand that the companies that do come for CDC intern, none of them are actually hiring for these kind of roles, like investment banking, for example. There are one or two companies in placements, but for internships, none of those skills would be directly transferable into the roles that you would be getting. So I think it's much more important to have a more relevant set of projects on your CV.
So continuing on the PR discussion, like for my interview experience and from what I understand of the finance recruiting thingy, PRs are like be way too low on your priority for stuff that you need for the offer, right? Insofar as my experience is concerned, I was like, because my PR wasn't in something that was finance inclined when you look at it from the surface. So I was even questioned that, hey, do your interests actually align with finance or not? And apart from that, PRs, like, none of the, like, I wouldn't say none of the skills, but the skills that you're actually, let's say, sort of visible when you're, let's say, when you have a PR on your CV, they don't necessarily translate to what's being expected by what the finance firms are expecting, right? So PR, sure, if you have it, nice. It can be a nice talking point during the interview, right? If there's some extra time, you can actually, because you've, like, you have the PR, right? You know what's done there. It can be a nice point of discussion about what your, let's say, what your PR is about, what you do there. Nice discussion, sure. But would that be an impediment to you getting an offer? No. Should that be something that you should be worried about right now if you're on a target finance? Not necessarily. So not that much of an issue, but if you have it, okay, nice. Decent to have it on your CV, sure. Maybe a 10-minute discussion on that if the interviewer feels like it. But apart from that, absolutely not necessary to have something great over there.
Yeah, I think it makes for a good talking point. If I speak of my interview experience as well, there was one question about my POR, and that was not necessarily because of the management experience. It's because I had mentioned about the investment fund at IFSA, and again because that is adjacent to the job, they asked me about that, how like about how we manage our portfolio, how we screen our investments, the whole investment thesis process, because that is relevant to the job. So I think if you have something on your POR that is relevant to your role, it could be an interesting talking point. But from the point of management skills or leadership skills, it's not as relevant for finance.
Okay. So that was a very insightful discussion we had here. So thank you very much for your answers.
I have a follow-up on tech thing you mentioned. Uh, uh, what exactly can one do in tech profile to get a finance role, or what exactly you did?
So when I said tech, I don't necessarily need like having a good sources profile or like being fluent in competitive programming or the data structures per se. If you are like comfortable with coding, that's definitely a plus, but you don't really need it to the amount of Excel that you would if you were, let's say, sitting for a quant or let's say an SD role, right? But of course, a certain amount of information is well and good. The tech that I was talking about is stuff on the data and ML kind of things, ML side of things, right? And that sort of becomes very relevant when you're talking about firms like, let's say, Morgan Stanley, because there are a lot of people who end up getting the role in finance, even if their even if their projects are pure ML or pure data inherently, and maybe not that much of finance on the CV, because understand that the firms have the rationale that they can teach you finance, but core thinking skills or those core problem solving skills that sort of come from there, or the idea about data, the comfort with data that sort of comes from from having done projects in those domains, that's tough for them to teach you, right? So that's something they're looking for first, and your comfort with finance wouldn't call it secondary, but yeah, that's how important that stuff is. Even for Nomura GM, they're actually targeting it. Definitely have a data sort of project on here. Now, you can have anything like, let's say, something that I did was I took up a topic from CFA L1. I did CFA L1, so like portfolio optimization, and I ran a Monte Carlo simulation on it and played around with Sharp and stuff. So that became a project. Of course, there's data involved. There's me coding stuff up in Python. There's a core finance concept behind it, right? Which of course comes from my background, which is here, which is CFA in this case. So I took a core finance concept. I applied a little bit of data statistics on it, and it voila, that's a perfect project, right? Background in finance, implementation with data, statistics, and then machine learning, deep learning also. Not necessary, but yeah, sure, if you have it, cool. Mostly machine learning. Yeah, you wrap this up, you have the perfect tech project that you would want in a finance unit. And that's fun as well, right? If you like finance, you'll actually like it because a theoretical concept that you have studied somewhere, you get to see it playing out live so you actually get to see it practically play out. And you see what its results are. Let's say you take data from the National Stock Exchange or something from NASDAQ, anything, anywhere, right? You take some hypothesis, you see it play out live. That's a great learning opportunity for you. A pretty interesting project and would definitely help you with financial softwares. Douglas. So, any follow up, let me know.
Oh, that was really insightful. Now let's start talking about the CV. How should someone approach designing their resume for a core finance role, and how heavily are the finance interview questions dependent on what you put in your CV? Oh, and are there any specific red flags or things one should be careful of when drafting it?
Yeah, so I think CV grilling is a crucial part of most finance interviews in general. So you should be completely well versed with your CV. You should know every pointer in and out. And for the pointers themselves, I would say it's very important to focus on technical keywords. For example, if you have an internship, you should focus on terms that are actually relevant for the role itself. For example, if you have an internship at equity research, for example, I had an equity research internship. So it is important to emphasize the technical terms. You can emphasize valuation sensitivity analysis, for example, scenario modeling, uh, things that are skills that would be transferable into the roles that you're looking for. And as for how to structure the CV, again, in the importance of what these firms look for, I would say put internships and projects at the top. If you have lesser internships, again, try to compensate with more projects and not just more projects, projects which are like more in depth. For example, if you're doing portfolio optimization, you can start with the Markowitz efficient frontier, and then you can build upon that. You can add more stochastic processes. You can do a Monte Carlo simulation. You can make it more inclined towards data again because that is preferable. And I would say get your CV reviewed, obviously, the by seniors at each firm that you're targeting, and sort of try to incorporate that into the feedback process.
Right. So, yep. Everything that Aditya said was definitely insightful. Your CVs have to be made a certain way. Another thing that worked for me, and that's something I definitely understand, could work well for others as well, was that mine was a top-heavy CV that caught the recruiter's attention. Now, what do I mean by top-heavy CV? That's a term that's used for consult as well. That being that my awards and achievements follow section, I put that on top of my CV, right? And that was hefty enough that got their attention. You could, what do you put over there, right? You could put on any Olympiads that you've done well in, right? Like I put in the NTSC KVP, I'm sure if that'd be super relevant for your batch, but that stuff. And if your rank's so good enough, you could put that in as well, and so on and so forth, right? So if that's heavy, that can grab the recruiter's attention as well. And of course, apart from that, internships and projects are again super important when you put them in your finance CV, because understand that, as I said earlier as well, most of us don't have finance coursework in our curriculum, right? So how do these recruiters understand that what's to be asked you, right? Finance in itself is an inherently very broad domain. How do they know what to ask you, right? So what they essentially do is that all of the questions that sort of are thrown at you are from your CV itself. Any particular point, any particular, let's say, any particular concept that you mentioned in your CV can definitely be a fleshed out question. Any particular any particular financial jargon that you use, they can essentially take on a tangent from there and ask you anything about it, right? So essentially, being absolutely comfortable with your CV is what's the most important over here. And of course, if you end up writing some certification like let's say CFA L1, FRM P1, or something of the sort, then the entire curriculum becomes fair game. Right? They can ask you on anything that can be a very inherently uh, intellectually interesting grilling session. If you do well in there, of course, that's a very big plus to your interview. But yeah, of course, if you do end up putting that in, you can't fumble on those concepts either. Any topic that you put in your CV, you're supposed to be comfortable with. So consequently, internships and projects become super, super important. Any internship, you should know what you did there in and out. Any number that you've put in there, have something to back it up. Any project, let's say you put something on the Markowitz model, right? Be absolutely comfortable about it. Be absolute. You should know like auxiliary stuff as well. Sharp ho gaya, security market line, capital markets line. Be comfortable with those basic concepts as well. Everything becomes fair game. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for those great answers.
Now, moving ahead, we all know that the panic that sets in right before the deadlines. Once you realize that you're out of time to make any further changes or additions to your CV, what should be the primary area of focus for the remaining preparation time?
I mean, like if like I guess if the CV portal's closed for prep, I mean, like, get your CV. I mean, like, ask a senior, ask a batchmate, ask someone who's graduated, ask anyone who's comfortable with your domain to grill you on your CV, right? Because once the CV portal is closed, that means that your CV is locked, right? You can't play around with that. What do you focus on next? The interviews. Consequently, just start prepping for it. I mean, like, try to get as many mock interviews as you can. Uh, get grilled on your CV. Get absolutely comfortable with your CV. And if you're so like essentially that of course ensures and entails all of the finance concepts that you've put in your CV. Get comfortable with all of them. If you've put in let's say like something like a CFA or a FRM, revise those stuff. Like revise all of it. So yeah, that's it. Like then you've got to start preparing for the interview. If the CV portal's closed, you're not playing around with the CV anymore, right? Move on to the further steps.
So, what was the highest return of investment activity during your final week of interviews?
Um, I would say once the shortlist start rolling in, I you should by that point be well versed in your CV already because there is a gap between when the shortlist do start coming and when the CV submission portal closes. So again, like Vidya said, you should utilize that gap to sort of go through every section on your CV, and you should go pointer by pointer and try to figure out what is like all the possible questions that can be asked about that pointer. So once you're well versed at that, once you're well versed with the technicals, I think you should actually move on to company specific prep. There aren't that many companies in finance in the first place. So I think that is easy to do. And once the shortlist start rolling in, you should be well versed with HR questions too. There is a book, I think it's 50 most famous HR questions or something. It's a pretty popular resource. So you should look at those questions and sort of come up with the answers. um, just the general HR questions, company fit, etc. And then once the shortlist start rolling in, you can do company specific prep, as in look at the company culture, general facts about the company, what is the nature of the role, talk to a few seniors who are working in the company.
Okay. Anything to add upon, Vidya?
I think that was pretty enough, right? That made sense. That's it.
Or let's move ahead. Okay, yeah. Please continue.
So, for the different types of concepts tested in these processes during the interviews or the GD rounds, what specific resources, books, or platforms were you referring to for your preparation? Aditya, would you like to address this first?
Yeah, sure. So I'll outline the process of Ivy Cap at least. It started with an assessment and then the CV shortlisting, and then it was followed by interviews. The interviews were mostly case based. They weren't traditional consulting type cases. It was more focused on venture capital itself. They gave me a startup that they were analyzing, and then they asked me to build a thesis upon it. So I think for that kind of an interview, it is important to be well versed with the startup ecosystem in general. And if you do want to get into venture capital, I think you should start by checking out reports by, say, companies like Bloom. Bloom produces a lot of white papers and stuff. You should look at those. You should look at how an investment thesis is formed on a company. And then market sizing, I think, is pretty important even for consulting and in general finance interviews. So, SOM, SAM, TAM, guesstimates of that sort. And then when it comes to the actual technicals itself, most of the technicals were asked from things on my CV. So they picked a section and then they asked me technicals about that. For example, equity research, or I had a credit risk intern. They asked me for a few technicals on that. So I think technicals would be more or less centered around what you have in your CV. And beyond that, a lot of firms test for general aptitude and probability and statistics. For that, you can refer to there's resources. There's a book. It's called 50 Toughest or 50 Challenging Problems in Probability. I think you should be well versed with PNS for sure. Most finance companies do test it. So do general brain teasers and these probability questions. Uh, yeah. Apart from that, with a
Yeah, cool. So I'll just quickly outline the Numera selection process first, and then I think we can get into the nuances of prep, right? So yeah, first off, you apply for the firm on the ERP portal, and just from the CVs, like the folks who do apply, the CV, there's the first CV shortlist, and then this shortlist is for the group discussion round, right? The first CV shortlist, close to 40 people are shortlisted. Then there's a group discussion round on the evening of day zero, and cool. Now in the group discussion round, like there's a group discussion, and post that, people end up interacting with the folks who are there for the interviews as well, right? It's mostly associates and a couple of VPs. You interact with them. That's essentially somewhere between a HR and a technical round. They hand out certain puzzles, and you of course have to solve them as well. So all of this is sort of clubbed in the GD round per se, because this just happens right after the GD, right? So I'll get into the exact nuances of what happens when, but yeah, for now this makes sense. Now from this, at least in my time, which is like last year, from the 40 people who sat for the GDs, 8 people were shortlisted for the final interviews, and then those interviews happened on like day one early morning, and there were like 3 rounds of interviews, and like the folks who ended up getting the offer ended up getting it after it, right? So for the exact process, the GD is like, of course, the CV shortlisting is based on your CV. There are 40 people who like then sit for the GD. So the group discussion essentially is about some topic. Like it's about it contains it like sort of is in the direction of macroeconomics, but about some current affairs topic, right? Some general knowledge stuff that's actually happening right now, and you'll be analyzing that said topic from a macroeconomic point of view, right? So that's what the GD is going to be about. And after that, the puzzles are sort of standard, as Aditya mentioned, the green book, right? The one that he just mentioned. Apart from that, you can read up on Heard on the Street. The entire book isn't relevant, but like the first couple of topics like statistics and probability, definitely relevant. Like you don't need to like study up about derivatives and stuff. That's like following chapters. Don't read up on that. But the first couple of chapters, definitely. And then there's the standard resource being Brainsteller. It's a website. Look up on that as well. Again, all of these are just for puzzles and probability questions. So yeah, that should set you up for the PNS part of the GD round. But it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it does happen. Post that, there's an interaction which is like pretty close to the interviews itself. And then, of course, if you make it to the interview round, which was like 8 people in our time, then we had like proper full-fledged 3 round interviews. Now, how does the interview process look? What are you supposed to do for that? Broadly, one round would be HR. So, of course, you can read up on those HR questions that the book that Aditya just mentioned. Understand those that your answers can't follow those templates. Those sort of have to be like those sort of have to represent you. Consequently, those answers need to be unique to you, right? If that sounds rehearsed or something of the sort, that's inherently a red flag. So understand that these folks, apart from your technical prowess, of course, technical in the financial concepts, apart from your technical prowess, they're looking for a culture fit as well, right? So those HR questions need to be online. You need to be polite. You need to be diligent. You need to sound diligent, and so on and so forth. So the HR round is pretty important as well. It's not like if you made it to the HR round, you'll necessarily get the offer. There are folks who end up dropping out after that as well. This was the third round, of course. The first couple of rounds are absolutely focused on CV grilling, right? Any word can be picked up from your, as I said, right? Any word can be picked up from your CV. There can be n number of questions on it. So yeah, it's just CV grilling stuff that I've already detailed. And if you've written CFA or FRM, they can pick up any topic, right? One thing they like to do is ask you what's your favorite asset class, and once you mention something, everything's fair game, right? They can ask you stuff about that. But of course, if you've done, let's say, CFA and you say that I'm into fixed income and bonds, they'll of course restrict yourself to the stuff that's been covered in the CFA curriculum. It can be haphazard because understand that finance is an endless domain. They can't ask you anything. So it's not abhorrent per se, but yeah, there's a limited universe, but anything and everything that you mention, that you've written in your CV, or if you even end up mentioning it, right? If you end up mentioning any jargon or any technical term in the GD, in the group discussion, even that's fair game for the interviewer to ask you on. So yeah, the first couple of rounds are about your CV, your experiences, and some general stuff, some basic finance. It could be time value of money. And if you say end up saying bonds, some basic stuff like a little bit about pricing, a little bit about how yields go about, how they change when, let's say, a particular macroeconomic variable changes. For example, how would bond yields be affected if the inflation goes up? Pretty basic example, but you could definitely face in an interview, right? If you've done, let's say, a project on that. So yeah, couple of rounds of technical stuff, one round of HR, and you should get the offer. Group discussion, of course, you should be like on your toes when it comes to stuff that's happening in the market. Like for my particular experience, at least back then, the entire Jane Street fiasco had happened. When I say that, I mean, of course, there was uh, some intersection with SEBI. So my question was based on that, like, should SEBI strengthen its norms on these HFTs? Sounds pretty vague, but you can actually dig deep on this, right? So I think another one was, how do you see AI getting integrated into the finance industry? These are, of course, GD topics. So they're pretty vague. They don't necessarily force you to think in a particular domain, but they can very well gauge your thought. In a group discussion, you need to be on your toes. You need to be able to articulate your ideas clearly, because these non-tech roles, they do expect you to be comfortable with expressing your ideas in a way that the person in front of you is able to grasp them. So consequently, that's that. When it comes to prep for group discussion, of course, be like thorough with the news. How do you do that? You can read up on local newspapers like, let's say, the Economic Times, to get the exposure to global stuff. You can read up on the Financial Times. The Mint is also a good source. Keep reading up. Be comfortable with stuff. If you're able to retain numbers, that will be definitely a plus point in the GD. And so that's for the GD, for like, I guess, for the PNS, the probability rounds. Yeah, even that's asked in the interviews as well, apart from your CV grilling. Your comfort with the PNS topics and the puzzles in general can very well be asked in the interviews as well. For that, you can read up on the resources that we've mentioned. For finance, be well versed with your CV. If you've written CFA or FRM, definitely be comfortable there. Yep, so that should be good.
Okay, that was really
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah.
So, as we have already got few insights on selection process, can you please elaborate more on complete selection process from companies you cracked, starting from the initial resume shortlist all the way to receiving the final offer?
I think my answer was thorough enough. I've covered everything, the entire process, be it shortlisting, GD, those puzzles followed by the three interviews and then getting the offer. I think the Nomura process I've pretty much recapped. Uh, I'll do one thing more. I'll do it for Morgan Stanley Sales and Trading as well because I'm comfortable with that firm. I've got friends over there, so I might as well see that over here. So yeah, for that, there's an online assessment. Like first of the CV shortlist, they got a pretty high CG cutoff. Post that, there's an online assessment. It's got like 6 rounds. They read you, they test you on your reading ability, your writing ability, your listening ability, your reasoning ability. Then there are a couple of coding questions as well. Like not very tough, but like yeah, there are basic coding questions as well. A couple of them. So yeah, that should tell you that they expect a tad bit of coding as well. And post that, there are interviews, right? And after that, the process is pretty similar. There are like there are I think 3 or 4 rounds of interviews, and you're grilled about stuff. There's the presentation of cool regardless. I'll just continue. You're grilled about your CV, you're grilled about stuff that you're supposed to know. That's pretty similar to the Nomura process. So yeah, that's for Nomura and MS, I guess, SMT at the very least.
Yeah, so I briefly outlined the process. I'll just elaborate on it a bit more. So it started with the CV shortlisting, and then there were people shortlisted for an assessment. I don't remember how many, but it was quite a lot. And then post the assessment was mostly aptitude. It was puzzles, mental ability, and then at the end there was some technical questions. I mean some finance related questions. There wasn't any coding, but some finance OAs do have coding. I think even NeoWealth had a coding question at the end. It was pretty easy. I think it was a lead code easy, but you can expect that as well. And then post that, there were 5 people shortlisted for the interview. There was one interview round with an associate and then one with a partner. And then post that, only I got the offer. I think the process is pretty similar for most firms, and OAs wise, you can expect puzzles, mental ability, and in some cases, coding too.
Yeah, Aditya's response actually reminded me. I'll give you the stats on folks who got in as well for Nomura. So, like, Nomura ended up taking through the CDC process, they ended up taking 3 folks right after the entire process, and 2 people joined us from the women mentorship program as well. Right, so those selections happened pre-CDC. I think those are already done for this particular section, as far as I know. But yeah, to be joined us from there. So, like, if you're from the mentorship program, you don't really need to sit for the CDC interviews. But yeah, 2 folks joined us from there. So 5 people in total for global markets.
Okay, that was really helpful.
As we discussed about the group discussion round, which is quite common in finance hiring, what particular genre of topics should one focus on?
I think my answer was sensible enough that you can sort of draw from there. Again, I'll just give you a brief overview. Current events, read up on that stuff, macroeconomic analysis of current events. I gave a couple of examples some time back. This would be good enough. And that's it. Right? Be comfortable. Like when you're speaking, be comfortable. When you're going in, just don't be stressed, right? That's how that is. So consequently, just relax, put your ideas forth clearly, be articulate. That's it.
Okay. Also, what news resources should students follow to build on a good approach to the global and Indian economies?
Again, I think I did mention them out loud, but again, Financial Times, Economic Times, the Mint, um, I think those should be good enough. There's a cap to the amount of stuff that you can cover, but yeah, this should be good enough. Aditya, if you have something,
Yeah, I think you mentioned more or less everything. Don't flood yourself with too many news resources. I think there is a lot of overlap between them. Uh, limit your resources, but read on them consistently. Again, you can follow one or two for more Indian specific news. And for global markets, I would say Wall Street Journal, in addition to the Financial Times, is a great resource. I think there's a Mint plus Wall Street Journal subscription. I think that's pretty worth it. Um, yeah, apart from that, just follow the recent events with all asset classes and even the different banks, the Fed, RBI, China, all the major economies. What is the outlook? What is the yield curve? The basic macroeconomic variables, and then have some idea about what's going on with different asset classes. I think currently, obviously, oil is very relevant. So things like that you should be well versed upon. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there'll be questions on the US Iran thing. So definitely follow that with all your heart.
Thanks to both of you. Let's move on.
So if we talk a bit more about the interview part of the selection, are they looking for more advanced and practical knowledge, or do they look for more strong fundamentals? Like realistically, what are they expecting from a college student?
So in terms of finance knowledge, again, most firms either don't expect finance knowledge at all, or they just look for basic inclination towards finance. Because obviously, like there's a reason that they're hiring from IITs and not say IIMs, for example, right? So they don't expect you to be completely well versed with the financial technicals as such, but I think a good understanding of the fundamentals and skills that are actually like relevant to the role itself, that plays a more important role. And when it comes to cases, for example, the cases that were asked to me were to test how I think about investments in general, like to break down the thought process of how you look at a company and decide whether it's investable or not. So the way you break that down into different structured buckets that you have to evaluate, it's more about your thinking process.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, advanced knowledge per se, again, hefty terms, but not required, right? Essentially, you're supposed to know what you've written on your CV. Right? If you mention anything, you're supposed to know that. And whatever you're supposed to know, like the basic fundamentals, of course, that you're supposed to know, that's of course drawn from what's on your CV. You're supposed to know them well enough. Like if they give you scenarios of, let's say if A varies, how would D be affected? You're supposed to know that. You're not just supposed to know what's A, what's B, but if they are sort of correlated, know what would happen if, let's say, inflation goes up, the same example. If inflation were to go up, how would the yields be affected, right? That's very basic stuff, but it's supposed to know how would stuff vary in that case, right? And as Aditya mentioned, quite some firms are hiring for the perfect finance roles. They don't expect much from you because they're hiring from an IIT, not from an IIM, right? So a certain amount of tech information is definitely expected. Financial, well, it's not great if you have it, but then again, that advanced knowledge per se, definitely not something you should be worried about.
Okay, those were some very nice answers. Thank you for that.
Okay. Now, coming to the topic of getting an edge, did any of you pursue the CFA or FRM exams? How did that decision play out for you, and do you recommend your juniors take it up?
Right. So I did give my L1 during CDC. I recently gave L2 as well. I think again, it serves its purpose as much as just showing inclination towards finance, but it's definitely not like a deal breaker, in my opinion. Again, uh, CFA is designed to be pursued at a later stage in your professional journey. I think because of the edge in shortlisting, a lot of people have started pursuing it earlier. But I would strongly recommend before, to not just focus on CDC interns and like zoom out a bit, sort of think about, is this really what you want to do down the line? Because even within finance, CFA isn't actually relevant for all areas of finance. CFA is designed most for asset management roles and for certain desks at hedge funds. That's where it's the most relevant. It's slightly relevant in IB as well. But for, again, roles like for tech adjacent roles like quant, not just HFT quant, but even like JPMC or Goldman Sachs quant, I think beyond L1, it sort of loses relevance. So before you decide if this is what you want to pursue, I would say zoom out, talk to people, and like really think if this is the career path that you want to go in. Because it's a lot of time commitment and financial commitment, right? You have to think about opportunity cost, whether the time you spend for studying, the time you spend studying for CFA, maybe it could be better utilized in optimizing other areas of your CV that would give you more of an edge.
Right. So I definitely resonate with everything that Aditya said. Like all of it is super true, right? As far yeah, I myself had it in CSA level when I cleared CSA level one before I started CDC, so that was definitely on my CV. But everything that Aditya said is something that you should actually weigh before you decide whether you actually want to do this or not, right? That being said, would that give you an edge? I mean, like, sure. It's because at the end of the day, they're looking for points in your CV that would show that you have an inclination towards finance. And if you've written CSA store, I mean, like you've invested that much amount of financial capital as well as time. Sure, it shows that you've got stuff over there. But rest assured that when I say that you can definitely make up for not having a CSA or an FRM by having relevant projects in your CV, mm, I'm sure about it. Is how I'll put it. Right? If you've got super relevant projects on your CV and the other stuff that we've mentioned, you're good to go. A CFA is absolutely not necessary. Not necessary, right? Back, like, up till my batch, or like even a cup, or even 1 year further back, like very few folks at CFA, like plus one to my batch, only one person at CFA in the entire 4 year batch. So it's definitely an edge. But from my understanding, quite some folks in your batch are writing it as well, right? So that sort of dilutes the entire point of having a CFA. And of course, it's limited relevance to what you're gonna be doing. So of course, another impediment to what's gonna happen, right? Because asset management looks well, right? But even for global markets, I mean, like the relevance is sort of capped. CFA even goes on to show that you've got a particular interest in finance, but apart from that, further levels are something that you should genuinely think about whether it would make sense for your career or not. And even at this stage, uh, okay, having a CFA is good, but if you don't have it, would it make it absolutely impossible for you to get a shortlist? Definitely not. If you have good enough interns or projects, you're definitely getting a shortlist apart from folks who, of course, might have a CFA as well. If you've just got a CFA and your projects aren't good enough, shortlist most probably might not be on the line for you. So yeah, weigh things accordingly. It's not absolutely necessary. Is it a good thing to have? Yes. But can you make up for it regardless? Definitely. Think about the long-term impacts of it on your career. When do you want to pursue it? How do you want to pursue it? And the Minik Aditya put it very beautifully.
Okay, that was a really insightful conversation.
That brings us to the end of our structured panel discussion. Audience, the question and answer box is open to you. Please drop your questions there.
Okay, we have one question from audience that goes, can you please list some good projects to have, specifically with respect to your respective companies, if possible?
Yeah, so I'll start this off. I think Ivy Cap is sort of an exception that the the tech that they expect you to know isn't as high as most other finance companies. But I'll just sort of give a general guideline. I think it's good to have a data analytics sort of project with financial context, right? So think of maybe things like predicting probability of default on you take loan data, you can take it from a bureau or you can find it on Kaggle, and then you can make an ML model to model the probability of default, hazard rates. So that's like an example. Like the underlying data is financial. You'll be using a lot of financial terms, expected exposure, recovery rate, probability of default. But the actual skills that it shows is more analytical, which is again what they are looking for. Some more examples could be option pricing. You can use various methods. You can do BSM, and then you can do a Monte Carlo simulation in that regard too. You can look at different payoff structures. You can value European options, American, Bermudan. So you'll make a whole project about that. And you can do a lot with derivatives. Maybe you can make like a hedging strategy for an airline, or say a farmer produces certain harvests at different times of the year. How do you hedge the commodity exposure there? And beyond that, I think portfolio optimization has already been mentioned. That's a great project to have.
So I feel Aditya covered most of the stuff there is to cover in this domain, right? Uh, Portfolio optimization, again, a great project. Apart from that, let's say you take up last 10 years the data of some particular index, could be some American index, could be some Indian index. Now, in general, I advise people to do stuff like or analysis on Indian NSE or BSE data, because that shows a little bit of ingenuity that recruiters do appreciate. So if you can account for that, definitely do that. Apart from that, yeah, you take up this data and then maybe you try to identify volatility regimes, right? When was stuff more volatile? A basic example of a project and stuff. Then you play around with such stuff. So most of the ideas that I had, Aditya just listed them out. So yeah, good enough. And of course, on the finance side of things, like absolutely non-technical aspect, you can have stuff like equity research reports, or maybe because are not very relevant to every role, but of course goes a long way in showing that you've got an interest in finance. So you're taking some particular industry or some particular firm up and you're like digging deep into its fundamentals, if you will. That's a good skill to have. So yeah, that could be well. Apart from that, if you're creating a key sequence financial model, that's something I had. Not necessarily very relevant to what I did, what I'm doing here, or what the roles are looking for, but shows an inclination in finance, like contributed towards my shortlist, if you will. And of course, mostly the stuff that Aditya mentioned, because most projects are pretty good to have on the CV.
I think I'll just add on to that. Ivy Cap again is sort of an exception because it's the only venture capital firm, and there aren't that many core finance companies. But I will list out some projects there just for the sake of completeness. If you are interested in venture capital, sort of the projects that you can explore is maybe try to build an investment thesis on a startup that you like. You can look at investment memos. A lot of firms produce them. Again, Bloom, A16Z. You can look at all these companies. They produce their investment memos on LinkedIn. You can read through that, sort of get an idea on how you can think about investing in startups and then replicate that about a startup. I think that would be a good project in case venture capital is something you're into.
Okay, that was really helpful. Another question we have is related to CADs. Are there any specific elective courses on campus, like financial engineering or econometrics, that you highly recommend taking before sitting for placements?
Yeah, so actually, this is something that I had ended up missing. So, of course, I won't be talking about placements, but my stuff's going to be limited to the CDC intern process. So, again, coming from the initial idea that I pitched like an hour back, that our curriculum does not really have finance. So you have to take initiative to show that you're interested in finance. And coursework, like taking a coursework on campus is definitely a great way of showing that. And recruiters do look at it and think, oh, he's like taking up this particular course as an elective. Pretty sure must be interested because otherwise why would you take the pain of going through that particular course, right? So some good courses that are present on campus and I can like just think of the top of my head is this one economics course by the HS department. Apart from that, Introduction to Financial Management by From. And there's this derivatives by I think it's not by Mahakud, it's a HS course again. And yep, some EP courses have a financial I think background as well. even those work good enough. I think there's this one called Economics of Entrepreneurship. That's pretty decent as well. And yeah, so coursework definitely would make sense. And if you can take up any electives like econometrics or stuff of that sort, definitely adds to your CV, right? Or definitely adds to your experience and stuff you can talk about plus something they're looking for. Yeah, one more thing that I wanted to address while we're on this. So uh, I do end up getting these questions about whether there is a sort of, let's say, department bias when it comes to finance firms. So that's definitely not the case, right? There's no branch or no department that ends up getting a preferential treatment, right? Your shortlists are absolutely on the basis of your CV, and then your further rounds, your interviews are absolutely on the basis of how you perform in the interview, right? So even in the initial shortlisting, there's no department that gets any sort of benefit. You're not getting any sort of benefit for being from, let's say, a circular department, or let's say sort of counterintuitive, but yeah, you're getting no benefit from being from, let's say, economics as well. Yeah, all departments are the same footing. It's fair game.
Would you like to add something to that, Aditya?
Um, no, I think Vidya covered more or less everything. Again, you can look at VG SOM mostly has all the relevant. I think even the maths department has a few financial focused courses. It definitely adds on to again showing that you have inclination towards finance. But obviously, it's not a deal breaker. You can make up for it in other areas of your CV. But if that is something you can do, I would suggest to look at it. And I think even grading wise, a lot of the VG SOM and EP courses have good grading too. So you don't have to be worried in that sense. Yeah, except for that, Vidya covered more or less everything.
Yep. So I
Okay,
missed one thing. I think that was in the initial question as well about financial engineering, right? So if you do, and I think all of you, at least the entirety of my minus one batch is 4 year, right? So if you do end up converting to financial engineering, of course that is beneficial, right? Uh, Easier to get a shortlist if you're in financial engineering. Like it's easier to get a shortlist in finance firms if you're in financial engineering. It's definitely a plus. But of course, you need to weigh it against the balance of converting to a 5 year course. Because I think you've got two folks here on the panel and both of us are 4 year mechanical. So yeah, not necessary, but if you do that, sure, it does make life easier. But then, of course, there are trade-offs. So think about it. Talk to people if you do end up wanting to convert, or if you do end up converting.
that was really helpful, and I think that pretty much answers the entire question. Apart from that, a very common question that is there is how can someone get clarity on confusion regarding domains or how to select a specific domain? Yeah.
I
Uh,
think both of
I
us
would,
spoke
s-
about it in
yeah,
the first question itself. Yes, sir.
yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
think both of us
it's
spoke
been
about it in
covered
the.
mostly. Yeah.
It's mostly done. But yeah, your experiences, why? I guess interns are a great way of figuring out if you want to do something or not. So go for it if you can. If not, talk to people, pick up self projects. Your experiences are your own, right? You'll have to figure that out on your own. It's not that tough. As I said, as we said, finance and data go hand in hand, can fit for them similarly together. So yeah, your
Yeah,
experience.
I think another thing I would like to add is that it's not like a irreversible decision. Like, don't just lock yourself into one thing. Again, there isn't as much finance specific prep. Like, it won't take that much of your time. So if you're already preparing for data analytics and you maybe say have a few projects in finance or an internship that is related to that, and you're sort of unsure if this is for you or not, I would say again, it won't take as much time to prep for it. So maybe make a CV that is more finance oriented and you can apply for both profiles at the same time. Always keep your options open. Uh, Again, it's not an irreversible decision. So
Yeah, I mean, like, it is sort of pretty great. It could be pretty great for you even in the intern process. So, like, right off the bat, I had shortlist in Nomura GM, American Express, the data role, and ITC. Those are three different domains pretty much. So yeah, that can happen. You can have shortlists in different domains, and that's something you can choose as you like. Just let it happen, right? Have some idea in your head. I was sure that I wanted to go into finance, and Nomura made sense for me. But yeah, I mean, like even if it's sort of gray, think about it. Like I said, in the interview process, you'll get to understand their rationale, how they think, what the recruiters are looking for, what the role might be like, and you can sort of choose from there as well. Yeah, don't stress about it that if you're not sure, absolutely sure of the domain you want to go into, you can figure it out as well.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that there was a lot to gain from all those answers. Before we conclude the session, I would like to ask the panelists if they have some tips or a few golden points that they want to share with us.
I mean, the entire session's been telling these golden pointers.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, guys, essentially at the end of the day, it's not that deep, right? I mean, let's chill out the entire process because if you're stressed, there's a very high chance that you might end up fumbling your interviews or the GD itself, right? You need to walk in all of those processes with a clean mind. So when the interviews do approach, be like relaxed. That's super important. So peace marna is essential to be able to do well. Because we need to have all of it, because you need to be on your toes, you need to be taking on the spot. And all of that is only possible if you're able to take it light, right? So chill out. And even I mean, like, this entire process is something you learn a lot from. Prepping for the process, prepping for the process are processes you'll learn a lot from. So definitely this entire thing is a great learning opportunity. Treat it as such. There are many firms that show up on campus will end up somewhere or the other. Don't stress about like getting one particular offer. It's not like most probably the role isn't what you think it is. Right. Like at this stage you don't have as much exposure to the work that's actually done. So yeah, take a chill pill, just relax, right? That's super important. Peace out.
That was very
Other
insightful knowledge. We would like to extend our heartiest congratulations to our panelists on securing successful internship. I thank the panelists for actively participating in today's event.
Also, another thing, we already know that the CV reviewing is very important. So do join the CV review drive where seniors like them will be correcting your CV mistakes, and do join the announcement group.